The goal of all these spiritual practices, meditation, for example, is that, the ancient swamis or rabbis or priests or monks or nuns or mullahs or whatever didn't discover meditation, for example, to perform better in sports. It can certainly help you do that, or to perform better in school, or to unclog your arteries or lower your blood pressure, all those things. It can certainly do all those things and help do all those things. They're actually powerful tools for transformation, for quieting down our mind and body so that we can experience more of an inner sense of peace and joy and well-being, and to realize that the meditation didn't bring you that sense of peace and well-being, but rather it was there already. What it did was to help stop disturbing what was there already. And so then the question shifts from how can I get what I think I need to be happy and healthy and lovable to how can I stop disturbing what's there already? And that's really important. That may sound like, semantic parsing of words, but the implications are quite profound, because if it's out there, then everyone who has what I think I need has power over me to be healthy and happy. But if it's me, not to blame myself, but to empower myself, I can do something about that. And then it becomes like, okay, what am I doing that's disturbing my health? And I can change that, as opposed to how can I get something that's external to me? So instead of feeling like I had to go to medical school and get into, to be lovable and happy and healthy, I decided I was that way already. I could experience that. It's not a concept that you can argue about. It's like, I remember it was, who was it? Jonas Salk said, I don't have faith, I have experience. You have the direct experience that, oh, when I'm feeling more peaceful, then I know that's true. And then I can go out in the world, paradoxically, and accomplish even more without the stresses and the anxiety that goes along with thinking like, oh, I have to do this because so much is at stake. So I went back to school, transferred to the University of Texas at Austin, graduated first in my class, gave the baccalaureate. And I say that not to brag, but to say I experienced both ends of that spectrum. On the one hand, I felt like a total loser, total failure. I just wanted to do myself in. I love watching It's a Wonderful Life, that wonderful Jimmy Stewart movie, because I can really, relate to that, like what the world would have been like if, I think if there's a hell, it would have been seeing what my life could have been like, and my wife, Anne, that you mentioned, and our two kids, and, all those wonderful things that I would have missed out on. I really think that, when you kill yourself, you lose your body, but you're still you just have a different form. Anyway, so when I went to medical school, I was learning how to do coronary bypass surgery with Dr. Michael DeBakey, who was one of the people who invented the operation. And, we'd cut people open, we bypass their clogged arteries, he'd tell them they were cured. And more often than not, they'd go home and do the same things that had caused the problem in the first place, smoke cigarettes, eat junk food, not manage stress, not exercise, et cetera. And then we cut them open again, sometimes 2 or 3 times. And so for me, that became the metaphor of what was wrong with traditional medicine. I mean, there's a lot right. I mean, we've all benefited from drugs and surgery that can be life-saving when used appropriately, but we weren't really treating the cause. We were only treating the symptoms. Later I had a cartoon drawn of doctors busily mopping up the floor around the sink that's overflowing, but nobody was turning off the faucet. It's like, when people get put on medications to lower their cholesterol or their blood pressure and their blood sugar, and they say, doctor, how long do I have to take these? What does the doctor usually say? Like, forever, right? It's like, how long do I have to mop up this floor? Like, forever. Like, well, why don't we turn off the faucet? Why don't we treat the cause? And the cause, more often than not, are the lifestyle choices that we make each day. And over years, 40 years now, 43 years, we've used these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be. And I think the biggest obstacle I find is people think, oh, diet and lifestyle, that's kind of boring. It has to be a new drug, a new laser, a new device, something really high-tech and expensive to be powerful. And we've been able to show how powerful these simple changes are. So I decided to go to these places that we used to call libraries, and these things called books, that you could, check out. And I began to read, and dogs and cats and pigs and rabbits and monkeys, you could cause them to get heart disease if you made them smoke or put them on typical American diet or made them sedentary or put them in isolation. And you could reverse it if you change those things. I said, why should people be any different? And Dr. DeBakey was kind of merciless. He was really old school. He was the kind of guy who would stick your fingers if you didn't move them quickly enough out of the operating field and so on. In fact, by the way, he'd say, what year are you, son? I'd say, I'm starting my 3rd year. He goes, damn, it's going to be so much harder to bust you out of here now with all these weird ideas you have. And he called me actually about, 3 or 4 years ago at the age of 99. Wow. I hadn't heard from him in literally decades. And he said, hey, Dean, this is Mike DeBakey. And he had a very distinctive Louisiana accent. So I recognized it immediately, although I hadn't heard him literally in decades. And I said, to what do I owe this great honor? He said, well, you know those ideas that I used to give you such a hard time about when you were my medical student? I said, oh, yeah, I remember very well. He goes, that's what's kept me alive all these years. He said, I'm 99 years old. I'm about to die. I just wanted you to, I thought you'd like to know that. He said, you know, my wife got interested in your approach. And so it's really helped me out a lot. So if you live long enough, you just never know. It's kind of given me a longer event horizon about how change can sometimes, you know, take decades, not just, you know, weeks or years. But anyway, and so I decided to take a year off between my second and third years of medical school, much to my parents' dismay. And did, you know, there's something nice about not being fully indoctrinated about what's possible and what's not possible. And so I didn't know enough to know what's not possible, you know, fools rush in and all that. And so I went to every hotel in Houston and found one, the Plaza, that donated 10 of its rooms to us for a month. And the chief of cardiology, the chief of medicine, one of the nice things about going to medical school in Texas at Baylor College of Medicine was that there is this really pioneering ethos there. It's like, you got this weird idea, go for it. You know, it may not work, but you'll learn something, so we'll support it, you know. When I went to Harvard later, it was like, you know, you can't do anything till like you're 40 and, you know, worked in someone else's lab for 10 years. But anyway, and so I put 10 men and women who had really bad heart disease in this hotel for a month, and they got better. And they not only felt better, 8 of the 10 people, their chest pain went away. They were better in ways. We actually had a test, which was a new test at the time, that measured, called a thallium scan, that measured blood flow to the heart. And we showed that 8 of the 10 people showed improved blood flow to the heart. And I showed this to the doctors and I said, hey, isn't this wonderful? They said, oh, well, you know, that must not be, the test must be wrong. I said, what do you mean the test? You did the test. These are the same tests we send people to bypass surgery with every day. Why are they suddenly not working? Well, you didn't have a randomized control group for comparison. How do you know they wouldn't have gotten better anyway? I said, well, technically that's true, but have you ever seen any patients get better like this? Well, no, but that's beside the, you know. Anyway, it was my first understanding that when you're doing something that's truly disruptive, that really challenges the conventional wisdom, it's often met with a lot of resistance. It's very threatening, not only threatening in the sense that people think, oh, drug companies and, you know, losing money, but it's really threatening in a much more primal way. The order that system provides kind of gets shaken a bit. So anyway, went back to school, finished medical school, then did a second study, took off another year. And this time we did have a randomized control group. We replicated those findings, published it in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Went to Harvard and Mass General to do my medical fellowship and residency, moved to San Francisco, began the third study, the most definitive one, called the Lifestyle Heart Trial, became a professor at UCSF and started the nonprofit Preventive Medicine Research Institute. And we used the, you know, again, these state-of-the-art measures, quantitative arteriography to measure the amount of blockages in the arteries, very accurate and reproducible and precise, and cardiac PET scans, positron emission tomography, to measure how much blood flow the heart was getting. We actually flew our patients to Texas, the University of Texas, which had the best cardiac PET scanner at the time. Went to great lengths to do the study. And it was also my first real direct understanding that when you're doing something that's really disruptive, it's hard to get funding for it because there's a catch-22. People think like, why should we waste our money? We know it's impossible. And without the funding, you can't do the studies to show it's possible. And if they don't think it's possible, they don't want to fund it. So I said, look, and I'd raised some money from some people in Texas who were in the oil and gas and real estate development world. And at that time, oil plunged and the people couldn't make their pledges. And so they said, you just can't do the study. So I talked to my staff and I said, look, I don't know how we're going to raise the money, but if you're in, somehow I really have this mystical idea that if you're totally committed to something, somehow the universe, and you're doing good work, somehow the universe will provide. And we had to raise at that time about $50,000 every month. And sure enough, every month, no one ever missed a paycheck, you know. I really think that's true. Anyway, so we found again that after 1 year, there was some reversal. The arteries became less clogged in the group that made these lifestyle changes, whereas they got more clogged in the comparison randomized control group, even though they were following the American Heart Association dietary guidelines, you know, less red meat, you know, 4 eggs a week, take the skin off the chicken, you know, et cetera. That wasn't enough it slowed down the rate at which they got worse, but that was the best you thought you could do, was just to slow it down, not to stop or reverse it. We showed that ounce of prevention, pound of cure, if you will, that it's hard to reverse a chronic disease. That's why we showed it for the first time in a control study, because people didn't go far enough. And then we used that as after 1 year, we then were able to get a grant from the National Institutes of Health, from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, to extend the study for 4 more years. And we found there was even more reversal after 5 years than after 1 year, but there was even more worsening after 5 years than after 1 year in the control group. And we published the 1 year findings in the Lancet, the International Premier Medical Journal, and the 5 year findings in the Journal of the AMA. And the PET scan findings, we found there was a 400% the improvement in blood flow, which we also published as a separate paper in JAMA. And then over time, I thought, at the time I thought, well, now that'll just change medical practice. And to some degree it did, but not nearly as much as I'd hoped, because what I learned is that science is not the primary determinant of medical practice, reimbursement is. And it's not that we doctors are only interested in money, but if you're trained to use just drugs and surgery, and you're reimbursed to use drugs and surgery, that's what you do. It's like, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you see everything is a nail. That we did I'm on the nutrition subcommittee working group of the American College of Cardiology. We published a paper a couple of years ago that the average doctor gets 4 hours a year of nutrition training, a year. And the average cardiology fellow in 4 years of fellowship gets it 0. So that's why doctors use drugs and surgery, because that's all they know. So I thought, if we could get Medicare to pay for this, there were some insurance companies, Mutual of Omaha and Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield and some others covered it. But I thought if we get Medicare to do it, that would really be a game changer, because, we doctors do what we get paid to do, we get trained to do what we get paid to do. So if you change reimbursement, you change medical practice and even medical education.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.